All right. Welcome to Volume 1, Episode 1.1 of the Oil Hour. Joining me is co Commissioner Adam Duffy. Adam, how is Wisconsin this evening?
It's not cold.
Well, that's always a win if you're in Wisconsin. Uh, this will be the maiden voyage of the reincarnation of what was once the Dead Ball Foul Show after a 4-year hiatus. Uh, Duffy, Josh Hastings, and I had a lot of fun drinking beer and going over the fantasy football matchups on the DBF. Uh, Life got in the way, and here we are 4 years later. We're bringing it back, getting the band back together, and we've got the biggest season of the oil so far. So before we really get into football, Duff, I just wanted to rehash the last weekend that we had. It was our 10-year reunion. We had our draft party. We saw lots of guys. What is your favorite memory of the weekend?
Well, I think it's probably a tie between right when the actual draft started Sunday and the ride home when we finally had something to talk about. We finally had material. There were teams and results. So, it's that wait for the draft, and then finally it happens, and then it feels like it's forever before that first Thursday game. But we actually had something to talk about. And that's not to sell short what happened Saturday when a lot of the guys we deployed with who aren't in the league joined us at Henry Hudson's, and we got to do a lot of catching up.
Yeah, we did a pretty vigorous social media and fundraising effort to try and get as many guys to that reunion as we could. If you're listening to this and you weren't there, I apologize. I'm sorry you couldn't get there. I wish you were. We had a great time. It was definitely something it'll make us want to do it again in 5 years, in 10 years certainly. There were about 50 to 60 guys there. It included IPLOs, civilian police contractors that we worked with. There was at least one interpreter there. There's a retired general and a retired lieutenant colonel that our squads escorted, and they wanted to be there and see the guys that protected them during that year. And then there were just, the Joe Schmoes in our unit that we hadn't seen in years. So we took over Henry Hudson's public house in Bricktown for what felt like 12 hours. Actually, it was longer than 12 hours because we got there at 11 a.m. and I think people closed it down.
Wow.
Yeah. It was a great time. I could not keep up. I couldn't hang like I used to. Everybody, it was just that entire weekend was just drink after drink after drink. But I wouldn't missed it for the world, and I had a great time. My favorite memory of the weekend, it's not being at the reunion, it's not being at the draft, it's the bus ride to the draft and the bus ride back. Those were the most fun times. You get a bunch of guys on a bus with some beer, and the stories start coming out. I thought I'd heard all the stories, but it seemed like everybody had one they pulled from under their sleeve, and
yeah,
it was a really good reminder of why we do this, why we put so much effort into this league, and why you flew from Wisconsin to Oklahoma on a 3-day weekend to come down and be part of a fake football draft.
And my very pregnant wife did not divorce me for doing it.
Yeah, that was really kind of her. My wife, who had a stroke about, I guess, almost 5 months ago now, she was very gracious in allowing me and many drunken gentlemen in the house all weekend. So thanks to her.
It probably had a lot to do with the fact that we were starting our mornings out with beer and George Michael.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a lot of George Michael for some reason. Well, and we don't have to do a whole lot of explaining because part of the issue with the last incarnation of our podcast was we had our audience, which was the guys that we play fantasy football with. Josh had bigger and better ambitions as far as getting into the world of podcasting and fantasy football analysis. We're just going to stick to our leagues. So if you're watching this, if you're listening to this, you know what our league is about. We do have an extra conference this year. That puts the total number of teams at 42. It's a 14-team conference, and almost everyone in the league was on that Sec 4 mission, but not everyone. So I would like to really quickly go through and show who the new managers are and just explain that. So, excuse me. So do you see that, Duff?
I see myself right now. Oh, wait, there's a split screen. Okay, I do now.
Okay. If the listeners have not already figured this out, this is our first time podcasting with the Google Hangout feature. So there will be some bumps along the way, but here we are. So as long as we are going to be, as long as we're introducing these gentlemen anyway, we might as well just have a quick down and dirty rundown of week one of the PFC, as we're calling the new conference. The first game included Scott Buer, Sergeant First Class Buer from the Sec 4 mission. He was the 3rd platoon sergeant, and the 3rd platoon team name or the 3rd platoon nickname were the Dirty Dogs, and so that's what he's competing as. It shows me as being co-manager because I am co-commissioning this league. He played Derek Baldwin. Do you remember him?
I do, and I'm glad that somebody finally went with Blue Falcons for a team name.
I love it. If I didn't have Arrogant Americans for the past 10 years, I would have taken it. So he is the Blue Falcons. Everybody listening to this probably knows that Blue Falcon is a Army euphemism for buddy fucker, and the call of the Blue Falcon is what, Duff?
The call?
The call of the Blue Falcon.
I don't know if I'm familiar with that.
Fuck off! Fuck off!
That's right.
So the Blue Falcons, the only buddy they fucked was themselves this week. Sammy Watkins got shut down and got 0 points. He started Derek Carr at quarterback. That was the only quarterback he drafted, unfortunately. But I talked to Baldwin, and I'll occasionally screw up and call him Little Baldwin. Little Baldwin is probably 30 now, so no offense, Baldwin. But Little Baldwin, he said he had some trouble drafting. He didn't get to draft all the players he wanted. So here, we have Derek Carr at quarterback for him and Jacob Tammy at tight end. So that's understandable that would not be the ideal lineup. He lost by almost 30. And is there anybody on Buer's roster that really jumps out at you?
On Buer's?
Yeah, on the Dirty Dogs.
As far as jumping out, I mean, without looking at his bench, I'd be curious what the solution for losing Deshaun Jackson would be. That's it looks like it might be his wide receiver one, and so although most teams maybe wouldn't invest that much into Deshaun Jackson, he is a talented player, and I'm just curious what his plan to back that up is. I'm assuming Eddie Lacy was a first-round pick, and I do like Frank Gore as a supplement to that. It's not a terrible team, but it's not like it doesn't scream championship yet.
No, and when I looked at the total and saw it was only 111 points, I expected to be really unimpressed. But what I see is just a bad week. It looks like this team could bounce back and do something. And, you know, he lucked out. He was able to escape with a win. So, you know, good for him. You know, it's always great when your team really disappoints, but you're still able to get that W. So those are the first two managers in the PFC. They were both on the Sec 4 mission. I've sent their contact information out there, and I'm glad that they're a part of it now. The next two teams, you've got Sergeant Randy McKay from the Sec 4 mission as the Orange Bloods. If I recall correctly, he was always having pro-Texas propaganda everywhere just to incite the rest of us. And he's playing, or he played Derek Tadlock. I don't personally know Tadlock, but he was or is in 158 just like the rest of us. And he spent 2008 in Iraq with the 158. So I
believe he's a papa. I know him. He wears glasses. I'm pretty sure I can picture his face, but
don't all papas wear glasses?
No, I don't.
Oh. Well, you know, all that to say, if you don't remember him from the Sec 4 mission, he wasn't on it. But don't worry, he got shot at and blown up too just a couple years later. He was at the draft party and seemed to have a great time, as was Sergeant Buer in the previous matchup. He was running off no sleep, and I don't know how great of a time he actually had. But Tadlock, I thought he drafted really well at the time, and week one did nothing to change my opinion. He beats McKay by about 25 points. And McKay didn't have a horrible game either. So,
yeah, I think probably what's going to be a theme throughout all this analysis is what happens in week one and trying not to overreact to it. So in all fairness, some of these scores are like Little Baldwin's team we failed to mention. He did have Adrian Peterson, who will probably not drop 9 points a game the rest of the year, and there'll be improvement. I just take a quick look here, and I think, Brandon Cooks will probably have much better games in a 9.3. Just going through. Golden Tate will probably have much better games in 8.10. And Jordan Cameron's nothing to sneeze at. So I don't want to do that every time and chew up a bunch of time, but it's worth noting that there's going to be a lot of unexpected, what the hell happened here type things probably.
Yeah, and let's see. I'm trying to figure out how to bring in Leal. Leal is apparently watching, and
I don't know if you're seeing what I'm seeing, but this is borderline psychedelic Pink Floyd video.
Yeah. Well, let me.
Oh wait.
Go ahead and copy this link, and I am going to send this to Leal via email. So I apologize, Leal, and anyone else, that the invitation you got earlier today is no good because we had a mix-up, and we just couldn't get our shit together. So that episode is about 3 minutes long and will be deleted. You know,
anybody who's never tried something like this, we highly recommend a dry run if you're able to do it. There's a lot of gadgets. Well, for something that has no cost, there's a lot of gadgetry, and it's not as simple as turning your computer on and going. So I hope we did a good job of overcoming the first round, and the second round's going a little smoother.
Yeah, and I seem to remember this